I'm Mary Braxton-Joseph. I'm your neighbor in the North Tower, and today it's my pleasure to interview one Nancy Schlossberg, a lady who almost needs no introduction. Some of you will know that she's a trained consulting psychologist. She has degrees from Barnard College and Columbia University. She's had a stellar career at the University of Maryland. She's written 10 books, count them, not one, not two, but 10 books. The last one of which was Too Young to Be Old. I love that title. She specializes in helping people to make transitions in life. She's a frequent guest on radio and television and Zoom, I'm told. She's even has her own website. In short, she's a legend in her own time.
Oh my. Sounds good.
And Nancy, as you know, usually does the interviewing, but today we're turning the tables, and I'm going to interview her and hopefully focus on some things you don't know about her. So let me get started. I understand that you have some things in common with U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, Senator from California, who was rumored to be on the short list for Vice President for Biden's ticket. So the first involves a wedding. So what was this wedding?
Well, first of all, she doesn't know me. So if you think I have an in with her, my godson worked for her. So when he was getting married, she of course officiated. And I flew out to San Francisco, and the wedding was the most unusual thing I've ever been to, really. My godson is white. He was marrying a black man, and at the wedding were people who were high up in the world and community organizers. There were people with socks on, people with elegant, I mean, it was such diversity in social class, color, everything. It was so exciting. I've never been to an event like that. The way she officiated was so personal because she knew Tim well. So that is my, I mean, I actually was introduced to her, but she wouldn't know me if she fell, if she fell over me. But it was a very exciting event. It really was.
Fantastic. And the second thing you have in common is Howard University, where she went to school and you actually worked.
Right.
And for those of you who don't know, Howard U has a large contingent of white students, even though it's a historically black university. So how did you, as a white lady, happen to get a job at a black university?
Well, first of all, there were many white people at Howard, but I never saw them. They were in the graduate school. They were in the medical school. I was in the undergraduate school, and it was a wonderful experience. When you go into a cafeteria and you are the only person of your color, you can identify with how people feel. It's a very strange feeling. But how did I get a job? Well, I was marrying my husband, moving to Washington, and I had been working at Pratt Institute in New York, so I sent my resume to all of the universities. And I thought I was going to GW. That didn't work out. Howard called me. President Nabert asked me to come in for an interview. And the next thing I knew, I was at Howard. I was the assistant director of the counseling center. And it was a terrific job for me, actually. And I really loved being there. It was great.
Super. So I looked you up, and you were born in 1929. Now,
yes.
You're a member of the silent majority. That's your bracket. I'm a boomer. You're part of the silent majority generation. So you were born mid-20s, sometime between mid-20s and mid-40s.
Right.
When you were growing up, women were expected to get married and have a family, and that was pretty much it. That was going to be your life's work. You were married twice. The first time, I think you had just graduated from college, and you had to choose between two suitors. So inquiring minds want to know, how did you decide who you were going to marry the first time?
You're a reporter, you like to dig, you like to, well, you know, I have to tell you, I think what is a little different about my experience growing up is there was no Betty Friedan, but it was in my head already. And there was one of the men who would live in Pittsburgh as a lawyer, and he was very attractive. I was very attracted to him. There was another suitor from New York City, a very nice guy, liked him a lot. But I knew that if I married the one from Pittsburgh, I saw the picture of my life. Coming home, I'd be in the kitchen, and Stan would be coming home from the office, and we'd talk about the kids and the laundry machine that broke, and I was at the age of what was I, when I graduated, whatever, I was nauseated by that picture. The last thing I wanted to be was a housewife like that. I am, by the way, a great admirer of women who do take care of the home. They are CEOs of small family businesses.
Absolutely.
It's a complicated job, too complicated for me. So I wanted to get out of Pittsburgh. I wanted to have a life that was different. I even knew I wanted a career. I didn't know what. Now, how did I know all that? I really don't know, except I had unusual grandmother, and my mom, oh, I guess I do know. My mother, when she married, got a job in Pittsburgh, where my father lived, on the faculty at Carnegie Tech, which had a big drama department. And my mother gave it up when I was born. And all growing up, I thought, this is ridiculous. She says she gave it up to take care of me. I never saw her. I saw the, I mean, you know, she was busy doing bridge and mahjong. And I'm thinking to myself, my mother was really talented. I saw her do some events, some drama events. I saw all that, and I knew that I felt that she wasted it, giving it up for me. I mean, that seemed so silly. So I knew that was not the path for me. And so I knew if I married Mike and moved to New York, I'd have a shot at a different kind of life, but I wasn't sure what it would be.
One of those life, you could have taken either path,
Yes.
and you took the New York path. So your second husband had a high-profile career and encouraged you to work, which was unusual at the time. What did he say that prompted you to seek employment? I mean, he was a very special man.
Yeah, well, forget Steve. Before Steve existed, during the years that I was married to Mike, I got a doctorate.
Okay.
And so when I was divorced, when Mike and I got divorced, we had no children. And even though that is not complicated without children, it still is very difficult. And I was so thin then. I looked like a sheepdog. It was wonderful. That's the good thing about divorce. But anyhow, so I was living in New York, and I was working, I got my degree. I was working at Pratt Institute. I had a fun job there. And I was introduced to Steve, who lived in Washington. And then Steve was mediating the New York newspaper strike at that point. And so he was in New York a lot. And after 1 month, we decided to get married. And I moved, but I couldn't leave Howard. I mean, I couldn't leave Pratt. So I didn't go down there for a few months, but when I did move down, I went to work at Howard. So I was already working. It's not that Steve encouraged me to work. What Steve did for me that was so unusual, he had an opportunity to work with Walter Reuther. Walter Reuther was one of the great civil rights leaders of our time. And he said to me, there's one Walter Reuther, but there are many universities. So we moved to Detroit. I give up my job at Howard. I'm in Detroit. I have no work, but I eventually got involved with the city, and I got some part-time things. Finally was in a non-tenure track job at Wayne State, that's his, it wasn't even on the tenure track. I said to Steve, we had 2 children by this time, I said, I've got to stop working. I cannot prepare for my classes, run the house, take care of the children. And Steve, who now had this high visibility job, he's general counsel of the UAW. He has meetings with, I've got pictures of him with every president. He's in the midst of all kinds of things. Walter, it was when Martin Luther King was killed. We were living right in the inner city of Detroit at that point. He was in the middle of all of this. And I tell him, I'm gonna quit work because I can't handle it all. And he said to me, you cannot quit. He said, if you leave Wayne State, you won't have the kind of career that you should have. He said, you'll be in and out of the labor market. You're not that good a housekeeper. You don't even like it. Why would you do that? This is 1966. We can figure this out together. And funny thing, very soon after, Walter Reuther said to Steve, I don't care how busy Nancy is, you cannot bring the children to negotiations.
But things have changed.
So, Steve was a very unusual husband. First of all, he was older than I, and to have that view in the 60s, it wasn't that he thought women should work or shouldn't work. He felt that my life was as important as his life, and that he saw that I was a career type, and that satisfied me, and he wanted to make that happen for me. And it was very unusual. So I always felt, during my whole marriage to Steve, I felt very free to be whoever I wanted to be, because I had his support. And he was extraordinary.
He was a real gem. So you moved back to Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And is that around the time you landed the job at the University of Maryland, or what did you do when you came back to D.C.?
Well, when Steve took the job with Walter Reuther, I said, you gotta promise me we're not gonna die in Detroit. Now, I love Detroit, but I didn't want to die there. I wanted to be back in, I wanted to die in Washington. So, Walter had been killed in an airplane accident. It was terrible. And then Leonard Woodcock became president of the UAW. And of course wanted Steve to continue as general counsel. And Steve lobbied for the general counsel's office to be back in Washington, because so much, they need to be a presence in Washington.
Yeah.
So we moved back to Washington. I, of course, left Wayne State, and I, by that time, had started moving up the ranks at Wayne State. And I'm looking for a job, and in the Chronicle of Higher Education, saw a job listing for the first woman executive of the American Council on Education. I put my name in, and I never thought I would get such a job, and actually I did get the job. And
How did you like that job?
well, I think it's a wonderful organization. It wasn't for me. I realized that I love being in a university. I love the freedom to say what I wanted to say. For example, all the people listening probably don't know that TIAA-CREF is the insurance that most faculty and teachers have. When I was at Wayne State University, I headed up one of the first women's commissions in the country. We actually brought a lawsuit against TIAA-CREF, because if you were a woman, you got less money than a man because you lived longer. And we said, look at smoking versus non-smoking. At any rate, TIAA-CREF became an issue for me. I moved to Washington, I get this job, and I went to a meeting and all kinds of educators, and the issue of TIAA-CREF came up, and I said, I'm speaking as an individual, and I talked about TIAA-CREF. Well, the next day, Greenough, who was the president of TIAA Craft, heard about this, flew down to Washington to talk to the president of the council about how your first woman executive is against TIAA Craft and so forth. So they had this big meeting. Meantime, I hear that there was a big meeting, and I spoke to the president of the council, and I said, I heard there was a meeting, and it was about my issue. How come I wasn't there? And he said to me, oh, that's terrible, I apologize. We arranged it in the men's room.
Oh, no.
So I thought, oh my God. So I realized I'm not cut out for associations. I need to be at a university where I can have the freedom to speak as an individual, to say what's on my mind, to fight for what I believe in. And I liked the council. It gave me some prestige, but prestige is not important. What's important, so I then took a job at University of Maryland as a visiting professor.
Okay, I was going to ask you, what was your first job there?
And so everybody was shocked, and here I am leaving this big job, and I'm going to Maryland as a visiting professor. And I was made in a very short time. They voted and they made me a full tenured professor. And there were not many women full tenured professors at that time. So in Maryland, that I was there a year, I guess, and that's when I was made a full professor.
No small point. Now, you obviously were a standout in your field because they named a conference room in your honor. You're now emeritus?
Emeritus, yeah.
Emeritus. What did your first position there was visiting professor. What, if any, obstacles did you encounter as you climbed the ladder in academia?
Well, personally, I really, let me back up. When I chaired the Women's Commission at Wayne State University, there were many issues that women faced and many problems they faced. I personally did not experience them. When I went to Maryland, they made me, I became a full tenured professor. I got all kinds of support for my research. They made life easy for me. Now, I've got to tell you that at a university, there's a lot of bitching, a lot of complaining, a lot of, oh my God, it's one of the best jobs in the world. I loved it. I loved it. So it's hard for me, but I saw discrimination all around me, and I was always working on committees and things to make things better. But it's interesting that I really didn't find, I personally didn't experience, but I saw it, it existed, and I fought it.
Yeah, well, 3 cheers for you, because it does exist. How do you think your experience in academia shaped what you do now?
You know, I think I had a few experiences that shaped me just as much. When I was a graduate student, there was a community center called Hartley House. I think that's the name. And they needed somebody to work there. And they needed somebody to work because there had been some murders, and it was in Hell's Kitchen. And they called the department, and they asked me to go down. I needed a job. I was divorced. I needed to make some money. I needed to quickly get my degree and get a real job. So I get this job at Hartley House, and I'm supposed to get jobs for the kids that the YES, Youth Employment Service, could not place.
And this was back in New York City before
Yes.
you moved to Washington. Okay.
And I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? Here I am, a very sheltered person. I'm in the middle of Hell's Kitchen trying to place kids that weren't placeable by YES, the Youth Employment Service. How am I going to do that? Well, first kid comes in. I said, well, tell me what you like. He said, I love guns. I said, terrific, we'll figure this out. I will get you we got out the yellow book, we looked up detective agencies, we called, do you need anybody who can sweep the floors? Do you need anybody who can do grunt work, really? My feeling was with these kids, I cannot get them a high-level job, they can barely get a low-level job, but if I get them in the industry in which they have some feeling about, and then I work with them in groups, maybe I can save some of these kids. The next kid who came, and I got him a job. Next kid who came in, he loved movies. I said, wonderful, we'll go to Radio City Music Hall. Actually, we went up together. We got him as low a level job as you could get, but he was at Radio City Music Hall. So I began to really understand that I don't have to look like somebody else, I don't have to speak like somebody else, but I can tap into their dreams. And my passion is if I can help somebody realize his or her dreams, if I can make a difference, that's important to me. So that was my first experience that really made a difference. And then I had another experience, then the community, now I'll back up. The community voted whether they would hire me full-time in Hell's Kitchen. And they did offer me a job. But Mary, I wanted to take the job. I knew I was making a difference, but I was living on my own, supporting myself, and I couldn't do it on $2,000 a year. So that's when I went to Pratt Institute. But then when I went to Detroit, while I was getting established, I did volunteer work at the Brewster Douglas Housing Development. And that was an exciting job. Francis Carnegie was head of the NAACP then, and he said to me, and this is before I was at Wayne actually, he said to me, if you can get kids enrolled in something after high school, I'll get the money.
Oh, okay.
So I sent a letter to everybody in the housing development who had seniors in high school. And I met with them all individually, and Frances got the money. This one young girl was interested in nothing. The only thing she was interested in is hair cutting. I got her a job as the first enrolled in school to become the first woman barber in Detroit.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And the AFDC mothers threw a dinner and gave Frances and me an award. That award means as much to me as many of the others.
AFDC, help us with that.
What is it? It's
It's
when you're on welfare.
Like welfare bonds,
Yeah.
okay. Oh,
Yes,
that's
welfare
good.
bonds.
Yeah.
So those were experiences that really were important to me and meant a lot to me.
So you always had a bent towards counseling, towards helping people?
Yes, and I thought I would end up a therapist, but that's not what I ended up. As a professor, and most of the other professors in my department had private practices. But even when I was at Howard, I thought this way. If you hear a problem that one person has, maybe 100 people have it, they're never going to come to your counseling center or come to you. And so at Howard, I would develop programs. And the same thing at the university. I would try to teach my students how to listen to somebody, hear what they're saying, and think, well, how can I multiply the effect? What can I do? So that was one strand at Maryland. But the other really was my research on transitions, and that's another issue.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your research on transitions, because you have been instrumental in helping people to make transitions. I know one of your speech topics was how to take the mystery, if not the misery, out of making a transition.
Yeah, taking the mystery, if not the misery, out of change. Okay. I think because transitions aren't so easy for me, the whole moving to Detroit and back. So when I was in Detroit and moving back, here it's my choice We wanted to move back. Here I had a terrific job, and I moved back. It should have been a piece of cake, and it wasn't. I'm calling my friends in Detroit. I don't know. I was not happy.
It's difficult.
So I said, something's wrong. Here's a transition I want, and I am agonizing over it. So I've got to understand transitions. And I had a researcher friend, very good friend who was a researcher, and we sat down on her couch and we made a laundry list of what I thought were all the things that made a difference. And then when I was at Maryland, I was lucky enough to be very friendly with some of the faculty in the measurement school, because I'm not a measurement person. And I started looking at things. And I'll tell you one funny thing. My first research study at Maryland was a geographical moving. And I compared people in the armed services with people who were just ordinary couples. So this is 1973. This woman said to me, my husband's in the armed services, I've moved 18 times, I'm not moving again. Well, I knew why. I knew, it's the women's movement, she's not gonna follow Handsome Harry anymore. But I was smart enough to say, well, why? And she said, I'm having an affair. So much for my research. Anyway.
At least he was honest.
Yeah. So my first study was moving. And then I kept doing one study after another. Adult learners returning to school, clerical workers balancing work and family. And every time I would finish one, then I would say, that's it, no more transition studies. And then I did the most interesting set of studies on non-events. We think of transitions as events. You get married, you get divorced, you do all kind of, things happen. But the non-event is when you have counted on something. You were sure that this was going to happen, and it didn't. There was a very funny thing in Ms. Magazine. It was a wedding invitation. It was like a wedding invitation, but it wasn't. It said, Mr. and Mrs. whoever announced that their daughter is no longer looking for Mr. Right. Place settings are available at Macy's. And we don't have rituals for non-events, the things that, and it was interesting, when I was doing the set of studies on non-events, we had a lot of non-events with immigrants, by the way, who would never see their home, or their family again, but a lot of people who wanted to have babies, never got pregnant, that was a big one. A lot of people, who had dreams about what they wanted to do. And so to me, this whole issue of non-events and how you ritualize them and how you come to terms with them in your own life. And that was, I felt, my most interesting research. I wanted to send the book over to Queen Elizabeth. The book became Going to Plan B. And I wanted to send it to Queen Elizabeth because her son, his whole life has been a non-event.
Yeah.
He's
right.
never
Oh
become
gosh,
king.
that's right, yeah.
But I didn't send her the book. And so I was really, and my graduate student said to me, well, is this a problem for you? I mean, the geographical moving was non-events. And I couldn't think of any non-events. I wasn't a grandmother at that time, but that wasn't something that I was dreaming and hoping and praying for. I'm thrilled that I now am a grandmother, but that wasn't that wasn't the motivator for that set of studies. And what was interesting, Tate not being a grandmother, that was a delayed event because my children married late and so forth. I became a grandmother. But a non-event is one that really hurts you to the core. You feel it in your stomach because you're not getting what you want. And my daughter, at her 30th birthday, would not let me celebrate or have a party for her.
Because?
I'm 30 years old. I don't have a farm, I don't have a husband, and I don't have children. She said, I could be the centerpiece of your book. And she went off by herself with a friend, and she was just very depressed. Now she's got a farm, 2 children, and a husband. So it's never over till it's over.
It's over, yeah.
But
Yeah, non-events, and that's an interesting concept. I wonder how many people have dealt with non-events and really not labeled it.
yeah, oh, I think you have. It's
Yeah.
like a broken heart. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So at any rate, I got fascinated always, and as I was at Maryland and more involved in the research end of things, at that point, I was tenured, I was a full professor, I could write what I wanted, and I started to want to write books that people, not other academics, could read and learn from and get help from. And so,
What was your first book in that series? I know about Too Young to Be Old, but what was your first
the
book?
first book in the series of Not the Academic was Overwhelmed, Coping with Life's Ups and Downs. And I took the work, it's written really for people in their 30s and 40s. And it's,
Was your daughter sort of an inspiration for this, or?
well, not for the writing of the book, but for a lot of the thinking.
Yeah.
And I learned from her to see how she went from heartbreak to this life that she loves. Raising goats. And she's, well, she was a teacher for a while, but anyway, it all worked out for her. So the first one was Overwhelmed, which really describes the transition model, but written for people, not for academics. And then the second one was Going to Plan B, which was all about non-events. So, you know, and the other books have been all about things that are accessible to people. Then as I got older, I started working in retirement, the retirement transition.
Yeah, speaking of which, now you are working with a group affectionately called the Aging Rebels
Yes.
at the Friendship Center. That's an interesting moniker, the Aging Rebels. Tell us, who are the Aging Rebels, and how did you become affiliated?
Now I'm retired, I've left the university.
You left the university and you moved to Sarasota,
Yeah,
and you've been here how long?
I think about 22 years.
About 22 years, and you've been at Sarasota Bay Club about 5 years, okay? And you're now working with a group called the Aging Rebels,
Right.
and they're the Friendship Center, so.
Well, how that happened, there's a retired lawyer in town, Michael Carr, who runs a group at the Senior Friendship Center on current events. And it's very popular. I think some people from here maybe go there. Some of the people in his group said they wanted something on aging. He spoke to Aaron, McLeod, who's the CEO, and she said, call Nancy. So she called me and said, would I be willing to do this? So I said, of course. And Aaron and Michael and I met, and at the first meeting, and this group named themselves the Aging Rebels, this beginning group. And Michael and I just started co-leading it together. He's a marvelous co-leader for me. He knows everybody's name. I don't remember my own name. And so whatever's going on, he knows the name. He calls them. People love that, and I envy that. So, and he sends out the agenda every week, and he sort of keeps us on track. What we talk about, this is not an academic, this is not a situation where I lecture about aging. It is a group of older people who are part of the Senior Friendship Center who want to talk about issues of intimacy, loneliness, what to do with themselves. One woman's husband has got Alzheimer's, and she can't leave the house because if she leaves, he falls. And so it's that sort of thing, talking about what's on their minds. And now that we can't meet in person, we meet in Zoom. And actually that works out pretty well.
So you're zooming with the aging rebels.
Right. So, but that was their name, and I'm just grateful to Erin for thinking about me, because I have loved doing it.
That is fantastic. So tell us about your latest book, Too Young to Be Old.
Okay.
How did that come about, and what can we glean from it? What's your message?
Well, I'm trying to think whether I should tell you the whole truth or not.
That's okay. We won't tell anybody.
I don't know. I was very active in the community, and I was very much part of a project on aging. And we started something called the Institute for the Ages.
Yes, okay.
And we got a lot of money, $1 million from the county, Patterson Foundation, everybody was giving us money. And we went belly up. We went belly up during the time that I was chairing
Oh dear.
that day. And it was a combination. We didn't have the guts to fire the director. We
Yeah, a
made
combination
some
of
missteps, you know.
We've all been there.
So, it was really interesting. I just felt terrible about it. And I thought, I've got to find something to do. Now that my career in aging is over, I've got to do something. So I've been wanting to write a book for a little older population on transitions. And so the book, Too Young to Be Old, well, I'll tell you this, because this will give you a sense of what my passion is about. I had a book proposal. Now, I write books, I don't write self-published books. I'm all for books that are self-published. Here's the reason I know. I'm writing about psychology. If I didn't have a regular publisher, I could write anything I wanted.
I see.
And so for me, if I were writing a memoir, you do a self-published. But to write the things that I'm trying to write, I want the legitimacy. So luckily, the American Psychological Association published my last 3 books. But they had published 2 of them on retirement, so I figured that was it. So I sent this proposal to Roman and Littlefield, and they came back with an offer. They wanted it longer, they wanted it, I forget how many pages, but a lot of pages and a lot more academic. And I thought to myself, it's very difficult to get published today. And if I turn it down, maybe I won't get published. And I wrote the letter, turning it down and saying that my commitment during my retirement years is to translate whatever I know to people in general. And I only write self-help books that are paperback so that people can afford them. That is my commitment. So I didn't write that book, and I took a chance, sent the proposal to the American Psychological Association, and they took a chance on me. So that's how that book got published.
That's fantastic.
But there are 2 chapters in it that dissect transitions. There's a lot on age bias. The final chapter is romance if you want it.
Woohoo!
But then there are chapters in between about caring and families. So it really was putting together all the things that I wanted to say.
That is fantastic and a great service. So you mentioned the Queen earlier. I don't know the Queen.
Oh, the
Queen
Queen.
the Queen of England. You mentioned the Queen earlier. I don't know her personally, but the Queen.
Yeah, the Queen.
I noticed that you've just had something published in Great Britain. Can you tell us the name of the I was thinking you could send her this publication. Can you tell us the name of the publication and what the article is about?
Well, it's the British Psychologist, and it's looking at the pandemic through the transition lens, understanding what we're going through, and there are 3 parts to it. They published 2 parts, and then I had a third. One is to understand transitions and what's going on, and the other is how the process, this transition process. The third, I guess there are 4 parts. The third part is what we can do as we're dealing with it, and what advice, advice. And it's just trying to look at the pandemic from the point of view of transitions. What was interesting, I called the article something like 6 feet apart, something 6 feet apart. The editor loved the part about the aging rebels, and he called it the aging rebels, and he furthermore asked if they would take a picture, so it has a picture of the aging rebels in it. That's what attracted him to the article. It wasn't the transition theory, he cared about that, he cared about the aging rebels.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Now, if people wanted to read that article, it is on your website?
It is now on my website.
So tell us about your website. What is your website? How does one get to your website?
www, then one word, transitionsthroughlife.com.
Okay.
Through is THROUGH. I have another thing. I didn't put my name on my website because I think that my name is not important. What's important is what I'm dealing with, which is transitions. So it's transitions through life. I started that website before I even thought of moving here.
Okay.
It's not the most sophisticated website in the world. I mean, I've often thought maybe I should redo it, but I'm not building a career right now. So I just tell the webmaster to put this on or put that on, and it should be on. There's a section in the book, in the website, called Articles and Speeches. I haven't kept up the speech part of it, but it's in the article part.
Right. And it's www.transitionsthroughlife.com.
THROUGH.
So we're hoping that everybody will go to your website. And now, drum roll please, for the questions that you ask everyone else.
Well, this is not fair. The fact that, first of all, you're terrible. I asked you questions and you kept notes, so you know the categories. I don't think that's fair.
Well, look, you were in academia. I learned something from you. I met with you and took 4 pages of notes. I had to condense it, but anyway. So the questions you ask everyone else. What drives you? What is your passion? Some of this you've touched on, but what drives you?
The thing that makes me the happiest and also the saddest, that in retirement I don't have the opportunity to open doors for people. I love it if somebody needs something and I can help them figure out a piece of the dream or a way to realize their dream. So when I was a faculty member, a student would come in, she or he is in a program, but really wants to do something else. And I could help them brainstorm how to get what they wanted. I think that even with my daughter Karen, when she was so depressed over her multiple non-events, I said, let's take a piece of the dream. You don't need the whole dream. Take a piece of the dream. And that's what started. She sold her condo, bought a rundown farm, now her wonderful farm, and one thing led to another. We can't control everything we want in life, but if I can help somebody see things a little differently so they can get what they want, if I can open up a door, that turns me on. I don't have the context anymore. If somebody came up to me and asked me something, I brainstorm, but it's, I don't have it's different.
It's different, but in a way though, Nancy, you're opening doors and making people think about things differently,
Right.
which I think can also be as fulfilling. You may not know it or realize it, if I'm at home reading your book at 10 o'clock at night and I read a passage and I say, aha, I could do this differently. You may never know about it, but you are in fact changing lives because you're making people think and you're helping them to see that they can look at things differently.
Well, I must tell you, every week, at least 1, 2, or 3 people I've never heard of. I'm using your work is helping me do this. That is just so gratifying. But I'm kind of a hands-on person, and so I like to work with the Senior Friendship Center. I enjoy being at Sarasota Bay Club. I like being connected with the lifestyle, doing some things when I can. But, and so I'm a happy camper, and I have to tell you, my career is zooming.
Absolutely.
I'm doing, I don't know how this has happened. I haven't done anything to make it happen, but I'm doing some, 4 that I know of, Zoom programs. One with women judges who are thinking about retirement. One in Australia with a group that works on transitions. They're working on transitions of first-time motherhood. One Monday night, I better remember, Monday night is with a library in Cambridge on transition. So I am doing it through Zoom. I was telling Jill before, doing a Zoom presentation, it lacks the energy and the excitement. And I found today, I got an email from the American Psychological Association. Alan Alda is doing training through APA of how to do Zoom things. So I signed up for it.
Okay.
It's not till August, and Monday night is my next Zoom thing. So I'm having fun learning something really new. Anybody can do a Zoom, and I can do it adequately, but I don't want to do it adequately. I want it to have excitement. And what I found lacking last night when I was in Australia for the night, what was lacking was the excitement, the energy. And so that's what I want to learn how to do. There's just so many wonderful things to do, and the other thing, I love to have fun.
I was about to say, what do you do for fun? What do you do for fun?
Well, I'll tell you about my birthday.
Okay.
So you have a birthday, and we're locked in, and we're locked down. You can't, well, I guess some people could go out to dinner, but I didn't feel I could. And with the people on this floor that I know particularly well and see a lot, so we'll probably have their germs, they have my germs. One of the men who loves to cook had a dinner for 6 people, or 7, and we stayed far apart at dinner, but I knew that we had to do more than just eat dinner. So I sent for, I sent for something, and my daughter helped me, long distance. She sent me little bags, and I put what I got in the bag. So I got there for dinner. I made a bag for everybody, and I said, the party's not over when the dinner's over. I gave everybody a bag and walked them down to the turtles, where the turtles are. And everybody had a vial of bubbles, and we blew bubbles.
Why not? That's great.
So, I mean, to me, fun would be sailing, fun would be traveling, but you can't travel right now. So you have to get fun in little ways. And it was just, I found it really very special.
Absolutely. I like bubbles by the turtles.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So that's
So we're coming to a close. I've got 2 more questions for you. What do you want for your legacy? How do you want people to remember Nancy Schlossberg? And if I could interrupt for a moment, I just happen to have a page from your yearbook.
High school, you're talking about.
Your high school yearbook, yes, which would have been...
I graduated from high school in 1947.
So this is from 1947. So then you were known as Kay. Your maiden name was Nancy Robin Kamen. And everybody
There were
called
so
you
many,
Kay.
yeah, because there were so many
Nancy's.
Nancy's.
So you were known as Kay, and it says here, a symphony of color with black hair and flashing green eyes set on a smooth ivory background. That's Kay, whose effervescence glows in everything she says and does. If you're hungry, you can count on her for a rye crisp. And if you have troubles, she will offer you sympathy, if not a solution. Friendly and popular, Kay's never too busy to stop and talk. She takes the best out of life, but she gives everyone her best in return.
That sounds pretty good.
I was about to say, it's pretty prophetic. You're giving people this gift of
That's
looking at
interesting.
things differently. Yeah, so they paid you. This was when you were a teenager.
Isn't that interesting?
But your legacy, how do you want to be remembered?
I should have thought of this in advance.
No, it's okay. Whatever comes to mind, because I can ask you another question. How would you describe yourself? Those are my last two
Okay.
questions.
Well, describing myself is easy. I think I'm energetic, enthusiastic, passionate, and inquisitive.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, I really am always, I'm very inquisitive, curious. But it sounds so trite to say what comes to mind.
But that's okay. It's whatever
That you
comes to
want
mind,
to
yeah.
open doors and make a difference and make other people happy and make yourself happy. I'm not a selfless person. I want to be happy, and I want my family, my grandchildren, I want to make a difference to them. I want them to see that life has many possibilities. I'm absolutely thrilled that I have 2 adult children and their spouses whose lives have taken very unusual turns. I mean, how many people have a farmer for a daughter? Or a son who's in the nail business? I mean, you know, it's just crazy. And I love it. I really love that. I love that they are their own persons, and I hope they're 3 girls. I see good things for them. And if I can be a part of making their lives better, I want to. And I really, I think my professional life was so central to my identity, and that when I get these calls from people, can I interview you? Can I talk to you? Can I use your work? How can I do this? That gives me such great pleasure, and that's my legacy.
Which you get a lot out of life, and you give your best in return. That's I think was prophetic. Anyway,
You're a terrific interviewer.
you have enriched all of our lives. I tell you, I've learned so much studying for this interview, and I want to thank you for taking the time. And I want you to give us that website one more time, because people can go to it night, day, or early in the morning,
It's
whenever.
not that great.
But it's got all your works up there. So the website again is
www.transitionsthroughlife.com.
So everybody know that you can hear Nancy, you can read her words by going to that website. Thank you very much for another one in a series of interviews. This time we interviewed the interviewer. Thank you all. Have a nice day.